Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and today we are going to talk about the concepts of warm-up. Warm-up is not what most people think it is. Most people have a rough idea of warm-up, and that idea is get on a treadmill and walk for 10 minutes. That is the lowest possible athletic version of a warm-up. The real point of a warm-up is to prime the patterns used in the workout so that you can prevent injury and get max athletic performance out of your workout. Injury prevention is kind of our main focus. The main focus, the most important thing. If we get hurt, we can't train. If you get hurt and you can't train, then you've kind of missed the entire point of the athletics of training. The goal is to train as consistently as possible so you can have the neurological adaptation of getting more experience in more sets, more days, more data sets for your brain, so that you can draw better conclusions about how to become generally efficient at the movements that you're trying to accomplish. Getting more efficient allows you to prime your max athletic output. Bodybuilders are strictly trying to be inefficient because they're trying to create a very physical type of response. They're trying to do as much damage to their body as possible in a very specific way in order to get it to look a certain way. Other athletes aren't really doing that. For the most part, if you're doing track, your goal is not to be so sore that you can't run the next day. If you're doing judo, the goal is not to be so sore that you can't go to class the next day. The goal is to go to class in judo 3 to 5 days a week and survive it by becoming more efficient. That's the whole point of like most martial arts training, which is kind of gets lost in the ideas of modern training. Modern training is less based on athletic output or athletic goals that are kind of useful in, let's say, gym training, 24-hour fitness coaches. They're just kind of picking things. They do a chest, a back, a shoulder, a leg, and an ab, and they kind of call it good. People are kind of shocked when that type of training doesn't really work out for them, and they don't actually get better athletically. We're always trying to figure out how to write programs to make us better at some specific version of athletics. People who are good at one specific version of athletics tend to be better at other versions of athletics. Ballerinas tend to be able to learn super complex amounts of information and endure massive amounts of pain, ungodly amounts of pain, and that allows them to be better at other types of sports and things. People who play any one sport at a high level can play other sports fairly well, usually, generally. That's a generalization, I know. How do we accomplish the idea of warming up? We have kind of 3 things that we're going to think about for now. We can think about a ton of other things later. Let's think about open chain movement. Movement that moves a specific joint through a specific range of motion to warm up the joint, the muscles, the ligaments, and the tendons by making them all move, moving them in the most degrees of freedom that we can, the most directions that that joint can move in, so that it is prepared to move in the ways we want it to move. You can pick which directions you want to focus your warm-up on to best match your athletic goals. The next thing that you can do is closed chain movement. Closed chain movement, the best example of this is our hip mobility series, where you are trying to warm up your hip joint. So you put your hip bone on the ground, you put your foot on the ground, and you move your leg, which moves your hip. Your foot and your hip bone don't move, so that the thing in the middle does move. The hip joint is moving in that series. That is the easiest example of closed chain movement. And then the next thing we have is weighted movement. When we think about weighted movement, we take the movement that we want to accomplish, say a kettlebell clean and press, and we have our target weight, say 24K that day for some reason, and we would do it at 50% or below. Think about doing that exact movement that you want to warm up with a weight that's 50% or lighter. You'll see something like this a lot in CrossFit where you have warm-up sets. You would set a timer for, say, barbell deadlift, and you would have 5 sets of 5, and that would be done every 2 minutes on 2 minutes, and that would be the last 10 minutes. And the first 10 minutes, you would be putting on plates and walking up to your target weight, which is a built-in warm-up idea. And you can do that for different things in different ways. Barbell's a little bit more specific because you really want to walk up to those big weights very comfortably. Kettlebells and clubs tend to be not so extreme because you're not pushing towards max load. Usually they're sub-maximal weights at medium levels of complexity, so you tend not to need that much specific warm-up for those things. If you're doing complex movements like a Turkish get-up, then you could also break each individual part of the movement down and do a warm-up for each individual piece of it. So for Turkish get-up, you could have the standing clean and press, the step back, the hip drop, about 10 ways to warm up hip drop. You could do the floor press to roll, floor press to elbow, floor press to hand, the half get up and the quarter get up variations. You could break all those down and do, say, one set of 3 of each one of those individual breakdown movements. That would make your warm-up 10 minutes, and that's fine for the most part. For the most part, the more time you spend warming up, the less time you spent injured. A great example of that tends to be martial arts class. When I did Kung Fu, we had a 45-minute warm-up for a 45-minute workout. They were equal. We spent a huge amount of time building complex movements in the warm-up every day because that's how you stayed alive. And that is why Kung Fu guys seem to never age, is they spend a massive amount of time doing warm-up every day, forever. Those 75-year-old Kung Fu guys who will just jump over a table and knock you in the face. It's because they spend a lot of time doing warm-up in these exact ways. So this is the general overview. What we're always thinking about is pattern priming. Figure out what the pattern you need in the workout is, then figure out what you need to do to warm that thing up. It's either going to be open chain, closed chain, or weighted sub-maximal movement broken down into individual components. You could pick just open chain movements. You could pick just closed chain movements, which we often do with people who are newer to training because there's less room for variability in the movement in a closed chain movement, or we break it down. Oftentimes the weighted breakdown are built into training programs if the training program is good. If the training program is bad, then it's not there. We will continue to talk about this in detail. Ask me questions about what about this isn't clear, and we will continue to answer questions because this could easily be 50 videos. We could talk about this forever. This is what separates good trainers from bad trainers usually. Usually a good warm-up has to do 4 things. It has to be time efficient, it has to be space efficient, it has to be equipment efficient. You can't write a warm-up for equipment you don't have. And it is heavily dependent on your general athletic positioning and preparedness. If you are new to training and somebody writes you a warm-up that you can't do, then it doesn't do you any good. A coach is always there to figure out what you can do, and he should be pulling from a huge collection of open chain movements and closed chain movements in order to write the best possible program that he can. You can write general warm-up programs, and we do it all the time, but the nerdier the coach, the more he has a plan how to get this warm-up to build something 3 years later. So,